My dog thinks there's a bear hanging out in our backyard. You know, that big. '28th of July, stand with the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
United States of America, to the republic,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Paxton,
Here.
Mr. Eisenbeiß,
Present.
Ms. Nelson,
Here.
Mr. Knox,
Here.
Dr. Ween,
Here.
Mr. Mosier. I know he's planning to join us. He may not be on just yet. Mr. Christensen,
Here.
and I'm assuming Kevin will join us shortly.
Okay. Any correspondent changes or agenda changes? Okay, we're at ceremonial matters then. So, Chief McLaughlin, Master Chief, what, you want to come on up and we'll provide important appropriate.
I forgot to get you a handheld mic, so you're going to have to hold on. Somebody can hear.
However you want me to do that.
This is one of the testimonies.
One of these things?
Yep.
Let's get over here then, so. Why don't we just come over here, tall man? Yeah, Chief. Let me get in the middle of you two dudes, so that would feel important.
Mayor, I don't mind reading if you just want to present it and do the handshake or whatever's easiest for you.
Okay, if you want to do that, that would be good. You probably speak clearer than I do anyway. Before you read it,
Well, here, Mayor, you want to hold on to this for presentation? I've got a copy here I can read.
okay, thank you. Well, before you read, we welcome Commander McLaughlin to Sitka. He's been here for what, 2 weeks now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great to have you. Coast Guard, both active and retired, an incredibly important part of our town. We appreciate all the good work you and your families do for our community. Go ahead, please.
Citation honoring U.S. Coast Guard Day. The city and borough of Sitka recognizes August 4th as U.S. Coast Guard Day nationwide and especially wishes to honor all Sitka-based personnel of the U.S. Coast Guard. Whereas Sitka is a Coast Guard city, one of 28 communities in the nation to be so designated, and the city and borough of Sitka and citizens take this responsibility seriously by making special efforts to acknowledge the professional work of the Sitka Coast Guard men and women and reaching out to these personnel and their families and making them feel at home at their home away from home. And whereas August 4th is National U.S. Coast Guard Day, marking the birthday of the United States Coast Guard, which began in 1790 and received its present name in 1915 when Congress supported providing the nation with a single maritime service dedicated to saving life at sea and enforcing the nation's maritime laws, and later added maintaining the country's aids to maritime navigation and other missions. And whereas the City and Borough of Sitka and the community of Sitka continue to support and honor the 5 Sitka Coast Guard units, Air Station Sitka, Coast Guard Cutter Kukui, Aids to Navigation Team Sitka, Marine Safety Detachment Sitka, and Electronic Support Detachment Detail Sitka as Americans Guardians of the Seas. Now, therefore, the Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka, in recognition of the 230th birthday of the U.S. Coast Guard and Sitka's status as a Coast Guard city, does hereby recognize the professionalism, skill, and unwavering devotion to duty of all Sitka Coast Guard personnel to provide Sitka with the safety, security, and stewardship of our oceans in an often dangerous world. We thank you and your family for your service. Signed and sealed this 28th day of July, 2020, Gary L. Paxton, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless. Thank you very much. Right? Yes.
Speech.
Is Donna Celestini here? Oh, there she is. Donna, come on up. Thank you. I want to give a service award on behalf of the City and Borough of Sitka, hereby awarded to Donna Calestini. This expression of gratitude, acknowledgement for your 10 years of world valued service rendered in the public interest while serving on the local emergency planning committee. Thank you. Signed by me and attested to by the municipal clerk. Thank you, Donna. God bless. Thank you.
And Mayor Paxton, I just wanted to let you know, Kevin Mosier is on the line. Yep.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, Sarah?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Special reports. We have one from our new electrical superintendent. Scott, come on up. Scott Elder, welcome aboard. First time in front of the assembly and our public.
Thank you, it's good to be here. Especially thank.
That's it. One again. All right. Choose the chunk. Hit it again.
You know, and I'm electrical. So I'd like to especially thank Dr. Wayne. I heard it was his recommendation that I come up here before everyone today, so thank you for that. Actually, it's a important part to contact each of you as well as the public, just to kind of relay where we are and where we want to head. And so I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be here in Sitka. I was asked to give just basically a brief introduction of who I am, kind of where I came from, what my goals and desires are a little bit here. So if I could, for just a few minutes, share some of that with you. Not just to the assembly, but everybody at home who doesn't have Netflix. So with that, I was raised in Western Oregon in a small logging community where mills were shut down, probably not too dissimilar to some of Sitka's past. I've been in the electrical industry for over 25 years. About half of that time I've spent in hydropower, so a little bit of hydropower production there. I worked for the Bureau of Reclamation as well as the Corps of Engineers on several power plants, including power plants on the Columbia River, the Snake River, and the Colorado River. My wife and 4 children have just recently joined me here in Sitka. I have a 5th child who is at college currently. And they're glad to be here also. A few things about myself. I do like good humor. I like to keep people guessing a little bit. I enjoy movie quotes. I like to study continuously, so I spend a lot of time in audiobooks and other forms of education. And I enjoy the outdoors, which is an excellent reason to be here. So with that, I am pleased to be here. I'm pleased to be the director of the electric utility. There have been a lot of changes in the utility here lately, specifically related to personnel. We've had a lot of wonderful people retire out and or move on to greener pastures here recently. So if you look at my organizational chart, we are indeed lacking. So if those, just a note to others, if folks are trying to get a hold of the electrical department right now, because of our staffing, we are fairly thin. It is not a desire that we have to not be quickly respondent, but that's the condition we're in. With that, we do have a lot of good things going on. Some of the good things, I suppose a quick quote from President Roosevelt. He once said something to the effect that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And with that, I would say that we have a lot of people within the electrical group who truly care about what they do and about the jobs and services they provide to the community. We have a lot of work that has been done here recently to upgrade our infrastructure and to get us in, in more of a forward-thinking path. We do have a lot of support from our city offices, and that's one of the things, I suppose, in the personnel department. Everyone that I've reached out to has been very supportive, very professional, with assistance to me and my crews. Some of my short-term goals is obviously to bring on staff and to recruit and retain the people that we need in those key positions. So we've been working at recruitment and bringing people on board. Also, I am I enjoy people. And so one of the things I want to focus on is building the kind of people and the kind of teams, in-house that we need to march forward into the future. Some of the things that I could, that we could also work on is communication. With communication, I would like to communicate to those who might be listening that we have to focus in prioritization, especially as we are a small crew maintaining a large set of facilities. My priorities are kind of three priorities that I'd like to relay. That is, we prioritize emergency work and outages as our first priority. Second priority, we need to focus in the maintenance of our systems, and that maintenance over time saves a lot of cost and money. Emergencies are very expensive. Planned outages and planned scheduled maintenance become very cheap over time, and that's part of that life cycle cost analysis stuff that we'll be talking about in the future. So that would be number two. And then the third is that then we focus on adding new customers and developing. So we have a limited fund of labor, and those are the priorities we go. We respond to emergencies, we maintain our structure, and then we focus on development. And so as requests come in, keep in mind that those are our priorities. Long-term goals, I've met with a lot of people. We've talked about some ways to increase our capital reserves. We have obviously been short on capital here recently, and anything that we can do to lower the costs of long-term ownership and to develop ways to increase our capital reserves is very much needed. We could do a little bit better in developing our maintenance models and also develop standardization through design criteria. I'm kind of a fan of design criteria. For those who don't know what that is, we take a little time in the upfront to decide what kind of equipment we want to install, how to standardize, how to specify what we want to see done to help lower those costs over time. And through doing that and through sticking to a design criteria, I believe we can save a lot of money in the future. So that's a little bit about me, where I think we're at, where I think we need to head. If anybody has any questions, I'd certainly take them.
Dr. Wayne?
I'd like to welcome you here to Sitka. I know that sometimes people take over new jobs, and it's just very easy to slide in the seat of something that's humming. But I'm sure that you found that that this is definitely going to be a challenge for you. It sounds like you are up for the challenge, and I'd like to say again, welcome. The other thing is that there are 2 Roosevelts. Was it Teddy or Franklin?
I believe it was Theodore.
Okay, Teddy. Okay, thank you.
Other question? Yeah, please, Steve.
Thank you for coming this evening. I think it's greatly important for staff and especially directors of departments to open lines of communication with the assembly. So it's nice to meet you in person now as opposed to just seeing some paperwork on you. One thing I did hear your 3 priorities, liked them, but I personally found one lacking on there, and that was maintaining a low cost of service for people. I would encourage that it's in the back of your mind in anything you do that we need to maintain our rates as low as possible throughout all the upgrades and infrastructure repairs that you have coming forward. Now they're not necessarily harmonious, I understand that, but I would also like to stress that our community they're starting to become very vocal about the cost of utilities, and electricity has a big chunk of that. So
Sure.
anything you can do to ease the burden on our citizens is going to be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Stephen. If I could clarify that second point, doing routine maintenance is part of that cost savings over time. And it just so folks who haven't maybe worked around maintaining facilities, if we put off the inexpensive maintenances of today, later on they become huge tragedies that we have to come in and bail out, typically by bond measures or rate hikes or something that is not very advantageous. Those of us who take pride in perhaps vehicle ownership, maybe we change the oil regularly, we do the things that keep us from the breakdown maintenance that costs a lot of money. And I think that perhaps plays to kind of what you were talking about.
It does, definitely. I understand that maintenance is much cheaper than emergency repairs. And quality maintenance is important to longevity of facilities. But while we're doing this, we have to understand that our citizens don't have unlimited funds. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Further comments from Senate members? Scott, thank you very much. God bless and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now into persons to be heard on any item not on the agenda. Yes, sir. Please come up.
It's on? Okay. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Paul Kraft. I'm the new campus director of the UAS Sitka campus. And I just wanted to come and basically introduce myself and tell you that, let you know that we really appreciate at the university the support that we've received from the city and borough of Sitka, not just in the recent past, but for a long period of time. So I wanted to extend the thanks on behalf of the university to you, and let you know that my commitment as a new director is to make sure that I am a good partner with you and bring you regular communication, work hard to collaborate with the city, with the borough, with the school district, and just with the community as a whole. It's been fun to come back to Southeast Alaska. I was in Juneau from 01 to 06 and worked at the Juneau campus of UAS. My son actually graduated from there, and he's now remaining in Juneau. So for the last several years, we've always looked forward to coming back to Juneau, or to Southeast Alaska. I didn't know at the time that I'd be able to work in the city of Sitka, but my memories of Sitka has been landing in the airport and then coming to a very abrupt stop on the tarmac, and that was about it. But while I was in Juneau, I always enjoyed coming over to Sitka. Once a semester, I'd come over and work with the staff and team here, and that was something I always really enjoyed. Now, it's been a great pleasure for me to get to know the great team that we have here. It's been very odd working with, getting to know my team through through Zoom meetings primarily. Met very few of them face to face, actually. So I'm hoping that that's going to be able to change. But just to let you know that we're working hard to keep the campus safe. Campus is still closed, but we will be, we're undergoing a lot of conversations right now to ensure that when we do open it up for classes, that the staff are safe, the faculty are safe, the students are able to learn in a safe environment. So again, just wanted to say thank you, let you know that I'm here and that I'm committed to working with you and open to collaboration moving forward during my time here in Sitka.
Sir, thank you very much. And yeah, we're all concerned about the longevity and the maintenance of Southeast School in Sitka. Incredibly important part of our town, and our assembly's engaged. I think Dr. Ween's the liaison.
I already have
And
had
so
a conversation.
And I apologize for not introducing myself. I didn't recognize you, but welcome aboard. God
Thank you.
bless. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Right. Anybody else on persons to be heard on items not on the agenda? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Assembly. Y'all know me probably more as LJ. I'm a little nervous about speaking. But I've been here 41 years. I've been a waitress for 35. I've been a cosmetologist since I was 19. I'm really saddened by the businesses that have went out of this town. When I moved here, we had from Catlean Street, you know, up by Lakeside, down, I counted, I do believe, 14 businesses we used to have. They're all gone. I have opened up, I worked for Bill Sheffield. I started off there as a maid, went to being a waitress, and then there I've been a waitress, like I say, for 35 years. I've known this community here. I've waited on each and every one of you one or more times. It was always my joy once a week to see you all. I always knew you by name. And this is what's sad about our town now. Everybody's fighting against each other over stupid stuff. And it really breaks my heart to see our community go from being, hey, how are you doing? And no matter how you feel on politics or anything, you can still come back and talk. And that's what I miss about our town. We were really united. We always got together. We always helped each other. There was no headbutting. And if someone was hurting, we were there to help them. The elders need something, we were there to help them. But now it's just like, okay, we have this and this and this, and if you don't belong to this and this and this, you have no right to say, you know. It's just sad, sir. That's all. And a lot of you folks weren't even born when I was waiting tables. So, and I worked for Pam and John. I opened up Victoria's. I worked at Jan and George's Canoe Club. And I always enjoyed the assembly meetings when they got off because Mr. Dick Smith would go up there and have a glass of wine over in the dining room, but just wonderful people. And we went from being a logging town to being a fishing town to being, now it's almost just nothing but government and tourism. I mean, we had mining, timber, and you know we had the pulp mill out here. It ran 365 days a year, 24/7. It never shut down. It had the best insurance there was. It took the kids out of high school, gave them jobs. There's not a business here in town that can say that they do this for our local people. And it's sad that we have to bring in people from out of town to take the jobs that people in town need them. We have a trailer park below us that my heart goes out to them. I don't know how they're gonna pay their electric bill. I don't know how they're gonna do stuff. But all of us are in this together, and if we can't make this community work as one big happy family, I'm really sad for you. But I want to thank you all. I really do, Mr. Paxton, for taking me, and you all on the committee here. Thank you.
Well, that is what we would like, ma'am. We'll all try to work to accomplish that. Any other items, persons to be heard on items not on the agenda? Yeah, okay.
Vonley Smith, members of the council. I've been thinking about this whole, Corbin Vallis thing since it started. I went to NCO school for 21 weeks. I studied germ warfare. The only thing that they lacked back when I was in school was a quick spreading thing like they have right now. Otherwise, it is the cat's meow to take this country down. China should be held fully accountable for what this country is going through, what these towns and what these people. This is all brought to you by people. It should be called a war. This is, I'm being honest with you folks. If I went into your country and killed 150, 60,000 people, hell, we killed 3,000 people on 9/11 and look what we spent. The good news about this, we're spending the money here at home. That's the blessing we're getting. Unfortunately, we need to do something with that money, other words than giving it to the cities to keep building these huge cities as empires. I see, everywhere I look, I see nothing but more city. In the name of city, in the name of government. And now the government's calling a shot saying, now this is what you got to do. I wasn't born yesterday. I've run a business my whole life. I've spent 15 years on the board of the co-op when we came in here and built the darn place, with keeping this place alive and making sure we got a fair price for fish. And every one of these people that's ever been fishing benefited from that. I don't care who they sold to. They all benefited because it was called competition. Today, the competition we have in this town is nil. It all comes from the government. Bye, thank you very much. And every one of them things we have to repay. We just paid, what, 15% more for utilities and lights? So I wish the man luck. I really wish him luck. He can't stop the spending that's going on here. Why you ask these people to come into this town and solve your problems and then suggest, oh, you're going to keep the cost down? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. That's just not what government does. And you should know that. You need to give people a break every once in a while. And like my wife said, that trailer park, I wake up in the morning and look down across the highway down there. And my heart goes out to them people that have worked here their whole darn lives. And they're hanging on by their fingertips. And the best thing you got to offer them, hey, let's bring in these people and bring these people in and let's do this and let's do that. None of them make money. You're spending somebody else's money. At least when I went fishing, I went out and caught a fish. And lo and behold, I brought the fish to town and sold it for cash. And guess what? You thrived on it. You give me one example of how you spent money and made that kind of change in this country, into this city. I mean, like I say, this is getting really ridiculous, chasing the boogeyman. This is no more than a boogeyman. It too will pass, and life will go on. And just about one of these days, we're going to show you very well how to deal with this. There's solutions to this. I've talked about it many times already. I used to say something on Problem Corner. Now what? There's no Problem Corner. Oh, we just can't find someone to run Problem Corner. Would you come in and run Problem Corner for me? Garbage.
All right,
you guys are all chasing a bunny rabbit down a hole.
Okay, doke. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Right.
Thank you for the moment. Huh?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Right. Okay, Scott.
Thank you, brother.
My name is Scott Saline. Last week, one of the assembly members stopped and visited me on Catlian and asked me what is decolonization, and I couldn't explain anything to him correctly, so I've prepared a succinct 2-minute explanation for institutional racism of the regulatory taking in Sitka General Code. It involves Mrs. Peters, who lived right next to this fuel tank, and her easement, her access to her house was on top of the fuel pipes that a stairway was built on. About 15 years ago, when she was in the Pioneer home, the city planner removed her stairs. She was paying property taxes on that lot. And the Union 76 settlement for the fuel spill was nearing. And when the city assessor looked at her lot, she didn't have access, and he reduced her value by 75%. Well, she went to the tribe, and the tribe couldn't help her with that, one of her last assets when she was in the Pioneer home, and she went to my neighbor, and that's how I learned about it. And she was forced to sell her property at a 75% reduction to the Uplands neighbors, who then used that property in the settlement with Union 76, the pollution settlement from spilling fuel all over Indian Village many years ago. 3 recent Supreme Courts that are decisions that are pertinent to this aspect is tribal corporation shareholders can now be silenced, and municipal policymakers, through malice or incompetence, are not held accountable unless money can be proven to exchange hands. And then the third one was last week, where eastern Oklahoma is now Indian country. Thank you very much. You can check this out, because I'll be back next 2 weeks with another one, just to keep going. Thank you.
Any other persons to be heard? No clapping, please. No applause. Thank you. Other persons to be heard? Okay, we're back to the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please? I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of items A and B. Items A includes the minutes from the meeting of July 14th, which was Bastille Day. And the other one, item B, has to do with the approval of the marijuana license renewals for licensee AKO Farms, LLC. And
Is there a second?
Second?
Right. Does somebody want to pull any item? Not call, any comments? Comments from the public? Thank you. Okay, call for the vote, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of items A and B, Mayor Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
yes.
and Ms. Nelson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on the consent agenda.
We're now on the boards, commission, and committee appointments. Item C, may I have a motion, please?
I move to reappoint Mary Ann Hall to a 3-year term on the Local Emergency Planning Committee in Category 6, members of the public.
Second.
Any comments from the public? Back to the assembly. Dr. Wayne.
I've worked with Mary Ann Hall for actually over a number of years, and that was seeing her at the LEPC as well as the Sitka Community Hospital Board. So thank you, Mary Ann, for wanting to continue your service.
Other comments from the assembly? Call for the vote.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mayor Paxton,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Eisenbeiß.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item C.
Thank you. Now under unfinished business, can I have a motion, item D, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-41 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 CARES Act funding category 2 businesses and nonprofits.
Second?
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Yes, Dr. Wayne.
Today, we received an email from Linda Benken concerning about an omission or a question concerning commercial fisheries. And I was wondering if the administrator had a comment on Ms. Benken's concern.
So John, if you want, you can take it, or I can take it.
Yeah, I was just gonna, thank you, Mr. Knox. I actually did not receive that email and found out about it at our working group just a few hours ago. So Mr. Knox informed me about it at the work group meeting, but there was no intent for any exclusion for fishermen, and I think Mr. Knox may have responded already with some clarification. So Mr. Knox, do you have any other information?
Yeah, I responded back to Linda, and they're fine with response back. It's not a disqualifier in the application if you don't have a business license or an EIN. It's just a way of gathering data and being able to help the grant assessor be able to vet different grants that come in. If people have it, that's great, it helps. If they don't, it's not a disqualifier.
So did you think that she was satisfied with the answer? She was happy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah, she
Kevin.
replied back and she's thanked me for the answer back and she was happy with that.
Other comments?
Yeah, I have a question for John real quick. With the, I'm just wondering how the working group is working on the layout of the size of grants. I mean, the super small, medium, and large. Has there been any talk about the large grant, like we've spoken about in previous meetings?
I'm asking for a little clarification, meaning larger
Well,
than the one that's on the application?
The 500,000 being the largest grouping, the gross sales of 500,000?
Right now, the discussion is to leave that threshold as it is. There's a 30-day long period within that, or there's a 30-day long application period. And it'll be at the end of our assembly agenda today, but you'll see in the application that we've got some language in there talking about how if the applicants exceed the amount of funds available, that will reserve the right to adjust the grants appropriately to operate within the boundaries.
So I'd like to ask.
That's actually not what I meant. I was talking more about, there seems to be no provision for the, I guess, the largest of our organizations. Sorry about my dogs. The really large organizations that $10,000 is, I mean, I know we're not gonna make anybody whole, but for the $10,000 is nothing.
So Tor, I can answer that. That has not been a discussion. We've kind of decided to leave the dollar amounts as is. We tried our best to, with the statistics available, to estimate these amounts, but we won't really know exactly for sure until we get all the money in. And I have a feeling, this is my perspective, that if we do that, others who need funds won't get hardly anything. I don't know if Kevin or John have anything to add to that.
The only thing I do have to add is we also had to take into consideration that some of the very large businesses that you're discussing had access to sometimes millions of dollars in some of the federal programs that were already available, and that's some of the data we explored already from the Small Business Administration with pulling that information. So yes, I understand that a $10,000 grant might be a drop in the bucket, but those same organizations or businesses were also able to receive upwards of $2 million of support from federal money.
To some degree, Tor, I think we won't know what we know until we get all the applications in. And if we get applications in that don't seem they're getting a rational share and there's money available, then I think the committee can deal with it at that time. So I think that we have to just see where we go on this thing. So, yeah, Dr. Ween.
Question for the administrator. In the forms, it says that there is a closure date of August 31st. Is that correct? And so, but you also state that if there is too much money requested, you're going to adjust the amounts. So my question is, will you be distributing the checks after you determine the total amount, or will checks be going out as applications come in?
The intent of our program is to accept all applications. There will be the easy ones to decide. There will be the ones that are going to take a little bit more analysis, but we will collect all the applications, put them in the appropriate sectors, make the adjustments as necessary, and then we will issue checks. But it's not a first come, first served basis.
So it'll be after the closure date?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the assembly? Call for the vote.
I have a comment.
Yeah, Valerie? Sir?
I just hope, I hope that with this process that we get the word out a bit better than we did on the electrical and harbor subsidies. I'm still talking to people that, I don't know if they live in a cave or what, but some of my relatives weren't even aware that certainly could have used and are getting their applications in for the electrical subsidizations, but I don't know if there's a better way to get the word out. The newspaper's not being delivered, so people, have to pick it up themselves, which a lot of people are still hunkering down, believe it or not. And I'm curious, or I guess we'll know sooner rather than later, how many did apply for the harbor and utility. And I've seen that there are some anomalies, but I hope that we can get the word out better. And I sure appreciate the work that the work group has been doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Valerie. Have we not asked for public comment? We've asked for public comment, but in deference to you, sir, we can do it.
Can I comment on this at all? Because I'm a fisherman of 40 years.
Yeah.
I know nothing about the letter that Linda Dinkin wrote. I just think it'd be fine if you were to read it, so we know what, you didn't know about it until when? So I'm just saying, it's
Just
only, I'm asking, you want to share that with the rest of us?
We need to hear you.
Well, they can hear me.
I can't, and I'm doing the TV.
Well, okay, you want me to repeat it again?
Well, do what you have to do.
Sir,
Well, I'm just saying.
For the record, sir,
Yeah,
the way this works, we have public testimony before the assembly decides, and then we decide. But in deference to you, we'll violate that change and let you speak. So what do you got?
well, that's the way it's normally done, isn't it?
We've had public comment and no one came
Not
up.
on this.
Yes, we have.
No, you didn't have anything on this. He didn't even know about the letter. How could he
Sir,
have
we did
anything to
have-
know about it?
We did have public comment on this item.
I just want to know what the letter was, because I know there's big institutions, Harvard, Columbia, they each took $25 million out of the last go-around. Why would they get $25 million? Huh? I mean, this is it. You guys are sitting on all this money, and the people that need it, and you're just sitting here going, well, we'll get it out by the end of next month. Well, my utility needs to be paid. My mortgage needs to be paid. My sales tax, you know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
I would suggest, and I'd like to hear the letter, simply, as a fisherman. You owe that to the fisherman.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Call for the vote, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-41 on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mayor Paxton.
Yes.
The motion is passes 7-0 on item D, and that's on second and final reading.
We're now at item D. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-40 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 CARES Act funding Category 3, new city funded relief programs.
Second.
Any comments from the public? Okay. Back to the assembly. Comments? Yes, Dr. Ween.
This is Category 3, which is called New City Funding, meaning this has to do with childcare, $500,000, food security, $200,000, support for behavioral mental health, $300,000, housing support, $750,000, and transitional employment program, $750,000.
Thank you, Dr. Wayne. Comments from the public? Yeah, Mr. Administrator.
I just want to take a few minutes to clarify some of the programs and some new details we've worked through,
Right.
if that's helpful at all.
Yes.
And if Mr. Knox or Mr. Mosher want to jump in as well. We know this one still is going to have more details, as we've talked about in some of the past few meetings, that we need the budget to operate within, and now we're dialing into details. So just some developments now with the child care program. The way we're looking towards is partnering through a subrecipient agreement with a program similar to THREAD, like they're using in Juneau, where there's a subsidy for each child, whether it's a full-time child or a part-time child in a child care facility. We're also looking at avenues for expansion that could be offering credits for people to get licensing to offer childcare or to increase their capacity. In the food security program, efforts are being made to partner with the tribe and the existing USDA grants to expand those programs, but also to make sure that some of the food that's being distributed is coming from our local distributors. So looking at the fishing fleet to assist with that. Support for behavioral and mental health, the $300,000. We're exploring expanding our employee assistance program, partnering with the Youth Advocates of Sitka and some of our other local organizations to see what support they need to expand their capacity. As far as housing support, I know it's important that we also serve our unsheltered population. So we're going to work or partner through a subrecipient agreement with the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation potentially, and we're going to work through some rehousing, transitional housing, and then setting some money aside for our homeless population and looking for ways to assist them. As far as the transitional employment program, we've still got some developmental work to do there, but the plan is not a one-stop shop, but we want to develop an RFP to find out who's out there to help us, what kind of projects they can help us with. We're going to outline some of the projects we want done as a city, and we'll also partner with the tribe on finding ways to get our unemployed and underemployed back to work, and it will be for economic development type activities within the city. Is there anything that I missed for the two members on the working group that you want to add?
The one thing that I would add in on the housing support, there's also in partnership with Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, we're going to look to mimic the rental and mortgage relief assistance that they recently did throughout the state of Alaska. We will do something similar to help add to that program just for Sitkans.
Thank you. Dr. Wayne?
Question is, you said there's a lot of detail that needs to be added. This is the final reading, second and final reading. How will you be coming back to the Assembly to inform us about what is going on and how the money is being spent? I do have a slight aversion to blank checks, if you know what I mean. So.
Understand fully, and we talked about that at our work group this morning. So any subrecipient agreement or contract or any agreement we decide to enter in with any of these partner agencies, or if we decide to contract ourselves, we'll bring that contract back to the Assembly for input and a decision on to move forward or not.
Yeah. It's interesting that today in the financial section, they were talking about the tsunami of evictions that's going to come nationwide, and they estimated maybe up to 34% of people. I was wondering if you had any idea of what's happening in Sitka in relation to the extent of the problem.
I'm not prepared to present any numbers, and I have not heard any recent figures.
Okay, thank you.
Alaska Housing Finance Corporation is probably the front runner on having a lot of that data, and they don't even have that kind of stuff right now. And they're doing their best to be able to get assistance out there and be able to measure what is a reasonable amount to be able to provide to the most. And they're certainly going to work on that with us. With the amount of money that we're looking at putting forward, we may be able to provide 2 months or so worth of rental relief and mortgage relief to those who are in need.
Thank you. Other comments on the Assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-40 on second and final reading, Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item E.
I have a motion for item F, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2020-39 and second final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 CARES Act funding category 4, city impact/mitigation spending.
Comment from the public?
Second.
Back to the assembly? Yes, Dr. Wayne?
Category 4, mitigation preparation. It includes the subsections of IT, information technology, protection of employees and public, ensure continued service in the event of shutdown, CARES spending consultation, and to cover significant portion of cost, I'm sorry, the article is not there, of the cost of public safety. I was wondering if someone from the group would like, meaning the WG, or the administrator would like to go down the list to give their vision of how they feel this money is going to be spent, and that's $1 million.
I don't mind doing that. So in the packet has what I'll call our wish list for City Hall, and it has broken down what is potentially reimbursable through FEMA and what we'd like to fund with our CARES funding. Understanding that it goes over our million, it's 1.5 total between FEMA and CARES. I mean, I could read the entire list off. It would take me quite a while, so I can read through the major categories and what we're looking for.
No, just we'll call it the high points, if you know what I mean.
So essentially within City Hall, we're looking for ways to provide some separation if we have to have bankers' windows, cleaning, some hands-free type faucets, those sort of things, sanitation of buildings, steam cleaning things if we need to, looking for self-checkout options at the library or self-service type things where you can work with a kiosk instead of direct with an individual in cases where we have to limit contact. Lots of emergency equipment for the fire department, specifically personal protective equipment. A lot of IT upgrades to be able to provide remote meetings when necessary. Thermometers, we'll be buying masks. We're pushing heavy on mask initiatives right now to have that stuff available. And sanitation stations, and I think that pretty much summarizes it on a high level.
One additional comment, and I'm still pretty hot on HVAC, and that is a significant portion of how the virus spreads, especially in cities, and people in offices or apartment buildings or in Centennial Hall where there's no real recirculation or HEPA filters, where there's no venting and so forth. And that includes City Hall and the schools. So I find it, again, I think it's something important to keep on the table, since I think it has been identified as a key factor in the spread of COVID-19.
If I could respond to that quickly. Unfortunately, one of the Treasury guidelines with this CARES funding is it can't be spent on items that were budgeted previously, and we have HVAC upgrades through all the City Hall buildings already budgeted for FY21, and in our capital improvement plan over in the City State building with the Police Department for FY22. So I think we were going at risk if we were to pull those off of our budget and use CARES funding for things that we had already had planned. But there is no doubt that it's an important aspect when it comes to slowing the spread of COVID or any virus, really.
Well, it seems fairly prescient. And the question I have to ask next is, or are these upgrades including the various protections that might assist in appropriate air filtration and usage?
And that we don't know the answer to, but I think we can definitely look into it and see if there's things outside of that scope that we can include in this list.
Absolutely, because if you've already have it, some money spent, the addition for, I'll call an appropriate bell or whistle might be money well spent.
Other comments from the public? Yeah, Steve.
John, Continuing the question about HVAC and more on the budgetary side, if we already have our list of budgeted upgrades, would it be permissible to improve that? For instance, we were going to get a lighter duty particulate filter than one that we could buy if we added more money to the project, or we could increase the airflow to a level that's now recommended. Is that an allowable use? To upgrade using, that still stays in the budget. We're still not eliminating that. We're simply buying better now.
Just going strictly off opinion right now, I would believe that is appropriate, and I think that's similar to Dr. Ween's question. If we have the HVAC upgrades already happening, I couldn't tell you confidently if that includes HEPA filtration, but if HEPA filtration is an upgrade to the HVAC system, I think that would be an appropriate use of CARES funding.
Other comments from the public? I mean, from the assembly?
It's more than just HEPA filtering. It's complete how airflow goes and how it's vented and so forth. So there's a little trick to it, more than a filter.
Okay, call for the vote, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-39 on second and final reading, Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item F.
We are now at item G. May I have a motion, please?
Move to approve ordinance 2020-38 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021, CARES Act funding category 5, school district.
Second.
Comments from the public?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly. On this motion for the CARES Act for the school, my question on this, didn't they get like $400-something thousand that they had to spend before the end of June? That's my,
This is that money. This is that money.
this is that money? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, this is for the following year then, right?
Right, primarily for,
The following year, next year?
right,
Okay,
for technology, I think, isn't it?
for technology. So our
No,
teachers,
this is for this year. It has to be spent by the end of this year,
Right.
and it's for
So-
counselors and.
That's right, counselors, you're right. I'm sorry.
And some technology.
Right,
and some technology.
right, okay.
I just don't quite understand why all of a sudden, you guys already budgeted money out for the school anyway, and that schools are turning around and getting the CARES Act money, which is,
Right.
fine. But I just don't understand, if the kids aren't be going to school, why should the schools get the money?
Okay. Well, I think they intend to open the school, and I cannot speak to how they're going to
know.
do it. It's a multifaceted approach, ma'am.
Yes.
But, so I think that, and the counselors, I think the school board argued pretty persuasively with all the trauma that's gone on. The additional counselors will be helpful.
Well, I just feel bad because some of these kids are scared half to death from their parents and from the teachers and from the schools themselves. And it's sad. And
It is bad.
kids shouldn't be this way. So anyways,
Concur.
thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
All you guys said.
You betcha. Okay, other comments from the assembly? Dr. Wayne?
I hate to sound like a broken record. For those who don't know what a record is, it's similar to a CD. And for those who don't remember 8 tracks or CDs, it's similar to streaming when your internet doesn't work. However, I still believe the city needs to take back or the school district needs to give back the Secure Rural money because that allows us to spend it in a particular way, which is, I think, far more efficient. And the CARES money would replace it. meaning taking aliquots from various of the funds to make up for that additional approximately $242,000. And I think that that's the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the Assembly?
I agree with Dr. Wayne.
Thank you, Valerie. Other comments? Call for
Well,
the vote.
except for the fact that the Secure Real Schools money can be spent throughout their fiscal year. This is to react to this particular issue here, right here and now. So, I don't think, they're not apples and apples. It's apples and oranges. So I don't think that they should be giving the money back. And I think they should be using that money for long-term benefit throughout the school year for the kids.
Other comments from the Assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-38 on second and final reading, Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
And Dr. Ween?
No.
Okay, the motion passes 5-2 on item G, and that's on second and final reading.
Okay, we're now at item H. Can I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-37 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 CARES Act funding category 6 contingency.
Is there a second?
Second.
Public comment? Back to the Assembly. Public, call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve this ordinance on first and, second and final reading, Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item H.
We are now in a new business. Item I. Can I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-43 on first reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 chief fallout.
Second.
Mr. Harmer, you want to come on and give a 1-minute overview of this before we take public comment so the public knows what we're talking about? Just a brief 1 or 2 minute overview, Mike, so that the public knows what it's about, and then we'll go have public comment. We'll come back to the Assembly.
Good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. Michael Harmon, Public Works Director, for the record. The Gary Paxton Industrial Park, we've had quite a bit of discussion. I won't go over the whole recent history on that, but we're motivated to look at and explore a haul out and the ability to haul out the fishing fleet in Sitka and perhaps beyond out at the industrial park. A RFP went out to explore private developers that wanted to provide that facility and operate it for the city. And at your last 2 assembly meetings ago, you turned down those RFPs for the reasons of funding as the primary reason. That all the proposers we got were very reliant on city funding to make that happen. So my understanding is, and the idea behind this item is to shift this project to be more of a city project, that we would be in a more leadership role to bring that project forward. We would be looking at the grant funding that we have already applied for, look at that coming in mid-September, and have a plan to address leading this project forward with or without that grant funding. This item puts seed money forward of $100,000 to work on a basis of design and build a team format around the project so we can make sure we're developing it in a way that it will succeed and it has strong buy-in from various members from the GPIP board to various working groups.
Right. Yeah, there's 3 different working groups that are gonna be working as they do this. It takes $10,000 to come up with a design to pursue the haul out and get ahead of the power curve. So hopefully, when we get our grants in September, we can move with pay. Okay, thank you. Public comment on this item? Back to the assembly. Yeah, Mr. Leach?
I just want to take a couple minutes to clarify some of Michael's comments and add some more detail here. The agenda item is for the $100,000 seed money for the design project, the seed, as I said, the seed money. There are still many phases within this memo that we haven't gotten to yet. So I want to explain the structure just a little bit. So this $100,000 seed money is to help design a slip and a washdown pad,
Right.
what is appropriate. So you'll see in the memo, there's a technical working group. That technical working group is going to be the engineers and the technical experts. You know, a stage where we don't need the administrator and the lawyer and assembly members to determine, you know, the tensile strength of metal and how big are the pilings going to be. That technical working group will work on their end. And then next we will form this haul out task force. And as you can see in the memo, that's most likely going to consist of some GPIP board members, some Ports and Harbor Commission members, an assembly member or 2, the GPIP director, and myself. And that's where we will more or less put together the economic plan to run through the GPIP board. And that will be the stage where there's public comment and public input to the process. There will be some working sessions where probably Ports and Harbors will be called in with GPIP to assist with that. And then the final stage will be presenting that product to the assembly. So there's some overlap in each one of those phases. In the next meeting, more than likely, we will come forward and ask the assembly to provide a member or 2 as we develop this. And then when those members are assigned to us, we'll continue with that haul out task force. But I just wanted to provide that little bit of clarification. And then that this ordinance is just for the seed money.
Well done. Comments on this? Yeah, Tor?
Max? Yeah, I have a couple of questions, or comments and questions. First of all, does this mean that we are officially giving up on the idea of having, doing it a private contractor? I know that we rejected the bids, but at the same time, it was mainly because the field had changed, not because we had rejected the idea of having a private contractor out there. And this seems to be saying no, that's completely off the table. And then it strikes me as that this, I'm just wondering what we gain by jumping on this now when in 2 months we'll know whether or not we have the money. And that's gonna be so radically different, whether if we get the grants or not, that, I mean, if we work under the, are we going to basically be working under the assumption we get the grants? Because if we don't, it's kind of a waste of time and money. And I'm still haven't completely given up on the idea of having, even if we get the grants, having a private entity, you know, basically build it for us.
Yeah, Tor, I think the work of this group will be valuable if we get the grant and if we don't get the grant. If we don't get the grant, we're going to be faced with 2 options: to do a revenue bond of some size to do it, or go back with an RFP for the public to do it. I mean, I think that's sort of where we are. But other comments from the assembly? Dr. Wayne.
Actually, I have quite a few. And I'll start with number 1, because this is for $100,000 for, and I'll quote the fiscal note, to support specialized consult services. And do you have, and that's for technical analysis and design related to the development of the haul out. Do you have any idea of who that might be? I know that we got PND to develop a 6-phase plan for the haul out. And I don't know how much that costs, but I know P&D means something like pay on demand. They're not cheap. They're an experienced large engineering firm. So I was wondering why their plans were no longer valid because it was in 6 phase. And so that would be question number 1. Question number 2 is I see Haul Out Pier and it has $4.8 million, and I don't see in the fiscal note anywhere for utilities. And that was a big chunk of change. That was like $2.4 million. And there are just some of those basic questions I have. So you can take those 2 to start with, and I have a few more if you'd like to, Mr. Harmon.
So in terms of the professional services, yes, you're correct. There has been professional services done in terms of master planning. In the past, in particular, P&D fed into an economic report that looked at the whole park, looking at ideas of how that should be developed, and they fed some ideas into that report about a haul out and different layouts. And then they also were hired to look at expanding the ramp that Mr. Glob put in, a private developer for the park, to see if that could grow into something larger scale. All of those concepts of the past are not the focus of today. So whether you're looking at the proposal, which I think was a very good proposal that the McGraws put forward from some attributes of it, in terms of the location, you would likely want to do a slip based on today's property ownership, which is quite different than when P&D looked at it before, and many different nuances that are going on in the park today. So we need to update. We really need to update, and we need to hit this right. And cost, especially if we don't get the grant, is going to be of the essence. This is very, very expensive construction. And so we really want to hit a home run of where we site this. So operationally, you're not regretting that for the next 20 years. And we do it in a way that's cost effective. And the current concepts, I don't believe, do that, and I don't believe the board believes that as well, and that's why this has been heading different directions, and why the private developers have been seeing it differently as well. They're seeing the same thing I think we are in the current ownership and configuration of the park. We need to evolve, and so we want to have really good costs to give you good information to make solid decisions, and you need that expertise to come in and help assist in that. And we also need the subject matter experts in town and throughout the region that have experience actually operating a haul out and the equipment, because we'll be looking at custom features, kind of looking at options to get the biggest bang for the buck. Can you get a larger lift that is more customized to haul a larger range of boats but work well for all of them? Because we don't have the funding to build 3 different slips in the most ideal way, or to necessarily build the way Wrangell did with multiple slips and a lot of different capability. We really have to be very ingenuity, the best word I can think of, in looking at all the experiences in the region. And we're going to try and put that all together to make it work best for Sitka and learn from their mistakes as much as possible, refine it, and conquer. And I think that expertise is super important in that, and experience.
At the macro level, pardon me, Dr. Wayne, it's to get a definitive design for the slip, which has changed in the washdown. I mean, the washdown is sort of, I think, I'm not sure that's changed, but the slip apparently has. Anyway, other
but
questions?
my question, another question, and I still have more, is why in the costing infrastructure, water, sewer, electric was not listed here, since that seemed to be a major thing. or is that become cheaper and have been included in all of this?
I stopped there in the information. I can certainly bring that forward because the mission in the discussions I've heard is, let's get started. What is the minimum we need to put in to get boats coming out of the water and starting to get serviced? We're going to have, and again, that's on the vision of the non-grant vision. What does that look like? How do we get this done as cheap as possible? And those numbers are much more to that side, and I would look at it as a phased approach. So electrical, sewer, those kind of things need to come later. Can they come through private development? Possibly so. If you get the core infrastructure in, maybe we have enough skin in the game, so to speak, to better attract that developer to invest in those additional things, or we'd be looking at maybe future grants. The build grant is open every year. I could see different phases. We would go after that year by year and build it up like we built this building or the library or any other project. It took several grants and many, many years to get there. So,
well, I'd like to thank you for promoting that Sitka is the tip of the spear for this, and hopefully if we begin to bill it, they will come. I have just a few other short questions. You have the technical working group and the haul out task force. Now, those two groups, we know that GPIP publishes their minutes and reports, and I want to know whether there will, when the TWG and the HFT meet, will they be constructing reports that will be handed to somebody and the assembly will have access to? I'm talking about now transparency. I don't mind looking at tensile strengths and technical
Michael,
matters.
I can answer that if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's the message I was trying to get at earlier, is the technical working group and the haul out task force, they're gonna kind of work horizontally with each other. And the reports will be provided to the GPIP board, so it will be made public, and that's where the public can have input to the process as well before all the reports are brought up to the assembly.
And I have one single other question, in that there was a real issue here when we were dealing with the RFP about certain of the stakeholders. And when I look at the people here who will comprise the group, I don't see where a place would be for certain of those local stakeholders to have a stake. And so that is a little bit concerning, to make the group a little more inclusive with, I'll say, the user industries, et cetera.
I can also answer that one. The way we vision this happening is that will be kind of a mix between the haul out task force, having a voice to that task force either through the GPIP board or having a member on that task force. But those specific groups will be represented and consulted throughout this process. Just like assembly meetings, the GPIP board meetings are advertised, and they will advertise that we're going to have a work session on the haul out, and we'll take public comment and input on those throughout the process.
Yeah, but the stakeholders certainly will have access to those groups, right? Yeah.
And actually, the stakeholders will be instrumental in the success of the group.
We think
Would like to see it, would like very much to see it happen, but you need to open up some of the members on some of these committees, and believe it or not, some of those stakeholders are pretty savvy with technical issues.
Steve?
Michael, assuming this build grant does not go through, do we have any backup funding secured to go through these, the washdown pad and the building the slip?
No, to my knowledge, all focus is on the Economic Development Fund. That's been the main source that I've heard discussed.
Oh, and that's not going to pay for the
Right.
washdown pad and the slip, correct? Do you have any idea how long it may be to get funding secured if the build grant doesn't go through? Months, years,
no. I mean,
decades?
The most obvious answer to that is you apply for next year's build grant and you find out in mid-September 2021 if you succeeded in that. Now, there is a lot of talk at the DC level of infrastructure monies coming through and stimulus, very much a stimulus focus to help spur on the economy. And I think that's a great opportunity for us. But to be positioned for that, we likely have to be shovel ready or very far along. They want it to feed the economy immediately. So the further we get in knowing what we want to do and be able to respond and have the team to do it, the better off we'll be able to accomplish that.
Great, and that answers part of the question that I was building up to, actually. The need to have a shovel-ready project. Because one of your comments that you said earlier, it kind of concerned me about doing this much development right now, is that our previous engineering report we now need to update because the situation has changed. So if funding doesn't come through now, but funding comes through in 5 years, chances are we will once again need to update this report. And so we're out another $100,000 plus. So my concern at this point is spending a bunch of money for a project that we don't have in the bank yet. And then the need to potentially spend more money on consultants in the future should the situation change. I understand shovel ready, I understand getting it there, but I don't want to have to spend more money to update here in the future.
Steve, one of my thoughts, which I've talked to the administrator about, again, this is just my view, if somebody decides these things, if the grant does not come through, then I think what staff needs to do is show us the cost of the minimum revenue bond we need to make the site functional. I think somewhere between $2 and $4 million, you could create a revenue bond. You can make the site functional. That's sort of a sidebar they can do. And yeah, that's my view. That's my suggestion on how we could do that. And I know if we did that right, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but if we had to do that, it would probably require, you're talking a few $100,000 a year. That's not important. You would probably need the GPIP to get some subsidy from the general fund for a couple of years until the GPIP had the kind of revenue source to pay for that minimal requirement to make it usable. But that's something we could talk about as we go forward. So
I have a question or comment whenever.
yeah, sure, Valerie, please.
I think Tor had his hand raised first.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Valerie.
My question has to do with the ordinance. It says, you know, we're going to take 100,000 from Southeast Alaska Economic Development Fund. Isn't that the Sitka Economic Development Fund, or am I confused? And I'm wondering what the current balance is. I don't have my budget book right in front of me. Thank you.
Jay, do you have that figure? Yeah, we'll get it to you in a couple minutes, Valerie. Yeah, Tor?
While he's getting that, so again, I'm asking, are we completely giving up on the idea of just having a private entity do this? Maybe with some low interest loans, because we had 2 companies put in proposals, and you know they I know that we refused, or we turned down all bids, but again, that was because we thought we might, because of the added of the grant. But are we completely saying we're just not going to go that way now?
Tor, this is a summary thing. I mean, my personal view is, if we don't get the grant, you've got 2 options. You could go to the private sector, or you could do a revenue bond. But that's for us to decide as we go forward.
I mean, we could do private sector with the grant.
We could. That gets to be a little bit hairy, doesn't it, Mike?
Well, the project itself, so I think a common theme we've heard from the RFPs we either done recently or in the past that we've heard, and sure, the market can always change. So again, I'm looking in the rearview mirror here, is that the industry wants to see us put in the infrastructure, and then they're interested in coming and run it. And that was a similar theme in our recent proposals. So I've always, I guess, off of that, seen it as some type of partnership. We're the infrastructure builders, we put it in. The grant is going to drive us that we need to be doing that because it's federally funded and there's a lot to that. But beyond some of that immediate core infrastructure, the upland development and the operations and those, I think that's where the partnership could be ripe. And I would encourage us not to give up on that. Absolutely.
Do you have the figure, Jay?
Good evening, Mayor Paxton, Assembly members. And this is from the FY19 CAFR, and for those that would jot it down, it's on pages 98 and 99. The fund balance at the end of the last of that fiscal year for the Southeast Alaska Economic Development Fund, $3,465,646. However, it's not all in cash because it lends out, and so some assets are the loans which are due. But it did have, at the end of that fiscal year, $2,167,073 in cash.
Yeah. I mean, that was my rate. We had about $2 million in the fund.
And we'll have you say the word unencumbered,
Yeah, unencumbered.
and the head was shaked, yes.
Sure.
You know, as far as getting money, I know everybody rejected it when we were doing the harbor to borrow money from the permanent fund and arbitrage perhaps as much as 3% or more with our earnings, and that was rejected. Arbitrage is a good thing to do, but again, with this, it's something that still, I think, when we need some money to be able to think that the permanent fund actually is not so permanent. If you look at the current state of our economy, where the value of the dollar has declined and all these other, I looked at the Doxy and so forth, and you may find that the 22, 23, whatever amounts of money in there will be either eaten up with inflation or will be lost through market forces. And so therefore, sometimes it is better to be ahead of the curve and spend the money into something tangible, like a haul out, and we can construct the deal with the variable amount of refunding based on how well the haul out is doing. I mean, there's a lot of creative stuff doing, because sometimes if you hold on to something a little too long, if you fall in love with an asset, you can end up with an empty hand. So as far as the money goes, I think there are some creative ways the city can do to get that funds, if we get those funds, if we were left out in the cold. Thank you.
Are there other comments from the assembly before we take a vote? Once, twice, right? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-43 on first reading, Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbaz?
Yes.
Dr. Ween? And Ms. Nelson?
No.
Okay, the motion passes 6-1 on first reading.
Okay, we're
Can we take 5?
Pardon me?
Can we take 5?
Okay, take 5, right? I'm on.
Yeah, now you are.
Anyway, can I have a motion on item J, please?
I move to approve Resolution 2020-26 on first and final reading, encouraging the people in the city and borough of Sitka to wear masks or cloth face coverings in public places.
Second.
Public comment? Please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Assembly members. I'm Dr. Dave Lamb. I think you know me from the last time we testified on this issue. Suffice it to say, I'm a physician with special training in public health to include epidemic and pandemic response. And in 30 years in the Army, I had a lot of training in this area, and in fact ended up being the primary medical advisor to the NATO group working on pandemic responses on a multinational basis for about 5 years. With regards to this resolution, 2020-26, I most strongly recommend that you reject this resolution. While it is better than the last version, which you turned down 2 weeks ago, it is still a very bad idea. The Assembly is not a medical body, and with the exception of Dr. Ween, you have no medical expertise on which to base this resolution. I strongly recommend that you let people make up their own minds about this issue based on their own knowledge and on discussions with their own healthcare providers, and quit trying to scare or force people into actions which you may like. It is very clear from the peer-reviewed medical literature, which I have read and which it is obvious that the authors of this resolution have not, that wearing a face mask in a community setting is not protective of the general populace. Now, I'm not speaking of a medical setting. I'm not talking about care of the sick, etc., but only of the general community setting, e.g. going to stores, etc. In a careful review of much of the medical literature on the subject, I have been unable to find one well-done and controlled study which clearly demonstrates that the wear of masks in a community setting for protection against viral infection is beneficial. As regards the current pandemic, it must be noted that some of the most widely infected locations worldwide are those in which mask wear for cultural reasons is common. The masks have not proven to generally protect the populace. Rather than belaboring this point, I would just like to read a short quote from the New England Journal of Medicine, which is usually considered to be one of the foremost medical research journals in the world, and certainly is not considered a hotbed of reactionary or anti-scientific thought. In their May 21st, 2020 issue, they published a manuscript which stated clearly that, quote, "We know that wearing masks outside healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. Public health authorities define a significant exposure to COVID-19 as face-to-face contact within 6 feet with a patient with symptomatic COVID-19, which is sustained for at least a few minutes, and some stay more than 10 minutes or even 30 minutes. The chance of catching COVID-19 from a passing interaction in a public space is therefore minimal. In many cases, the desire for widespread masking is a reflexive reaction to anxiety over the pandemic." Now, if people want to wear masks, that's certainly their right, and those who are sick or symptomatic certainly should do so if they don't stay home, which they ought to be doing. But please quit trying to get those of us to do something that is not medically justified. Please get back to the work the Assembly is supposed to be doing, such as budgets, and in which you have expertise, not giving medical advice for which you are poorly prepared, except for Dr. Ween. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Lamb. Right.
How we doing?
We're doing well, Marshall. How are you doing?
I'm Marshall Albertson. I own 3 businesses here in town, and I have about 20 employees altogether. And why I'm even back here again, 2 weeks after I was here discussing this with a lot of the other community members, and the majority of the community that was here 2 weeks ago, they gave testimony why they thought we should not have to wear masks. Do not try and force us to wear masks. Okay, then the Assembly, they take up the vote, and you voted it down, right? We're not gonna try to make you wear a mask. And now, because we got a couple tyrannical overlords on the assembly, they think they could change a little bit of wording and stuff and put this back on the docket because of whatever fears or phobias they may have, I think is absolutely ridiculous. And I brought $10,000 cash with me tonight. If this is about fines or whatever, I want this to cover all me and any of my employees. We are not going to wear masks. If my employees want to wear a mask, it's up to them. I will not wear a mask unless I go into a store and they require me to wear a mask, then I'll be more than happy to comply. But we cannot, you guys cannot, and those guys on the TV screen up there cannot make me do it or make anybody do it. It is not enforceable. So why are we even having the discussion? If you're an elderly person and you got a higher susceptibility to the COVID, stay at home, wear your mask, do whatever feels comfortable. You have your mask on, it makes you feel comfortable. That's great, but I don't feel comfortable. So don't make me, don't make anybody who don't want to do it. I thought this was done 2 weeks ago. I thought that's why you guys had a vote. But they want to do a little magic with their wording and put it back in here like, oh, nobody's going to notice or maybe nobody will show up for it. Well, you know what? Some of us still pay attention. And it's just not right to force the American people. If you guys don't see what's happening across the country and it's bleeding into Sitka and Southeast Alaska and everywhere else, it's going to get bad, guys. And the more our government tries to overlord and tells us what we have to do, the more people are going to revolt. I'm telling you, I'm not saying it just to hear myself talk. It's, please stop trying to force us to do shit. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. And again, for the record, this is no mandate, it's just an encouragement. Yes, other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Paxton and council and Dr. Wayne. I am a breast cancer survivor for 12 years. 12 years ago, I had a doctor right here in town tell me, Linda, you go into a doctor's office, I want you to wear a mask. You go into a hospital, I want you to wear a mask because I want to prevent you from getting something from someone else. But as soon as you walk out of that building, Linda, I want you to take that damn mask off. Now, and I said, well, why? And he says, well, it will take your immune system and lower it. Plus, it will make your blood pressure go high, make your oxygen level go low. Now, I see people around here, it's all up to each individual if they want to have a mask on, but if they only really, truly knew what they were doing to themselves. And what really gets me is the flu season's going to be upon us here coming, and you're going to have all these people wearing masks. And then when they do come out taking their mask off, we're going to have a flu outbreak. And you guys are going to say, this is COVID-19. And I'm going to call bull on it, excuse my expression. Because the reason why I say that, my girlfriend here in town lost her cousin. She was 42 years old. And you know what she died of? Cancer. You know what they called it? COVID-19. These numbers are nothing but flawed. And it really upsets me that this town falls for it. I see people being mean to other people about not wearing masks, and it's not right. No one has a right to tell, I don't have a right to tell you what to do, and vice versa. And it just really upsets me that we have a few folks here. I could have reached through my TV 2 weeks ago and grabbed someone. Well, someone here up on the TV screen lives out on an island, does not have to worry about it. And for you to sit here and demand that we go ahead and redo this mask nonsense, think again. Like I say, my husband knows about germ warfare. He knows about this. A lot of people know about this. And what's sad is that last time we had fishermen in here, and you guys know the people are out fishing. A lot of these important things that take place you guys have while the people are out fishing. Because you know these 600 fishermen out here that pay taxes and try to get hauled out would be in here to make this discussion also on this mask. I just think it's sad. 2 weeks ago, you took a vote. Now we're wasting time, money, and other people's time and money. So, Mr. Paxton, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Wynn, thank you so much. And everyone on the city council.
Right.
Thank you.
Other comments from the public?
Mr. Paxton, council members, I got two stories here. And I've been out following this since it started. One of the stories is about a doctor from Blythe, or Raleigh. He has a cocktail made up that he gives to his patients. He's handled 300 people, personal people. Not one of them has had to go to the hospital. They sent them all home. It's an outpatient clinic. I want to give you some hope, and the listeners some hope. This is not the end of the world, and we need to tell the people we got this covered. Because otherwise, why do we have all these doctors? We don't have any people that have died here. This guy has a cocktail he's put together. He sent a letter to the president telling him, this is how you deal with this. There's another woman, oxyhydrochloroquine, zinc, and Xyrothromax. There you go. Those 3 drugs. And you get a person that's coming down with this stuff, you don't get them when they're ready to die. You get them when they're coming down with it. It's like you go into your medicine cabinet. It's not 200 milligrams. Maybe it's only 20. Why isn't this available? You know how many drugs we have in the drugstore market to take care of the flu? Nighttime, easy time, sleepy time, wake up time, work time. Shit, oh dear, man. How silly are we? Like I said before, chill out. It's all going to be okay. This terrifying paper cannot say anything positive about this crap. Nothing. It's disgusting. I call that person up at that the paper. Hey, is there anything Trump has done good? I don't know. Well, has he done anything? That's our paper. What a bunch of morons. And they got these kids in these schools terrible. Who's dying in schools with this crap? Oh, well, I don't know. Under 20? Any? And we're terrified. I heard 3 teachers the other day talking about going back to school. This blew me away. One's preschool, one's 3rd grade, and one's middle school. 2 gals and a guy. They were more scared of getting it than teaching the kids. And the kids aren't the problem. Who's the problem? The teachers. And they got a mission they're after. We got to do something about this thing. And the way they terrify these people is beyond imagination, folks. You people need to be sending the message, this is going to be fine. This is going to be okay. Get over it. You know what I mean? I'm not scared of it. Ever since I heard these 2 doctors talk about that shit, I'm not kidding you. The fear went away. You know why? Because he told you, it's not a problem. Wash your hands. Keep your eyes away from your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay away from some people. And hey, live your life. Now, if you live in New York City where you got 1 million people, well, it's not 1 million people anymore hopping down the streets. They've emptied that place out. But you go to these major cities, it's a different story. And little old Sitka, Alaska, Mr. Mayor, we got the cleanest air in the world, and we need to believe it. It's going to be fine.
Right, thank you, sir. Thank you. Other comments from the public? Once, twice, back to the assembly. Okay. Dr. Williams.
Next.
Yes, Tor.
So we brought this, we changed, last time there was some heartburn with saying that it's required, so now it's encouraged, which is definitely not encouraging. A few points to make. First of all, the mask is not primarily to protect the wearer. It is to protect other people from you if you have it and don't realize it. The masks have been shown to be quite effective at that. Not particularly effective protecting you a little bit, but much more so to protect other people from you, because COVID is a slow-moving disease that people often have it and don't realize it. So it's not a case where, well, gee, if you want to wear a mask, you protect yourself. That's not the way it works. And by the way, one of the reasons, I do happen to have 20 years in emergency medicine, but it's, it's not. The CDC, the state of Alaska, every single health department or the equivalent in the developed world is asking people to wear masks. Some are requiring it, some are just asking it, but every single one. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Zink, have all asked people to wear this. It is a tool, it is right now the only one we have. It will slow it down. Nobody says it is perfect. It's not forcing anybody, because again, this is just asking people to do it, asking people to look out for their neighbors. I have received, I don't know how many emails about this, and they're running about 20 to 1 asking us to do something like this. The reason why you're not seeing a lot down there is they don't want to be in a room full of people without a mask. And I don't particularly blame them. I am coming into town to go to work and do EOC meetings, but I am trying to limit my exposure like we all should. The United States, and unfortunately now Alaska, has more cases of this than anywhere else in the world by a huge margin, by any metric you want, by per capita or actual numbers or whatever. We have more than anybody. And a big part of that is because we are not doing some of the basic distancing and masks. And there are some other issues, of course, but right now, the only tool we have, if we want to keep businesses open, if we want to try and continue to open and continue to let charter people in here and all that, is to try and reduce the spread. And right now, the only tool in our box that we have is masks. It's not that hard to wear. I wear mine, it's just not that bad. And anybody who says that you've got increased CO2 just needs to throw an SpO2 monitor on while they're wearing a mask, and you'll see it doesn't dip. There seems to be this idea that you have a God-given right to infect other people. And I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but we don't. But even if you did, it's just the right thing to do to make sure that you try and protect your neighbors. And that's all this is asking people to do. Protect the people around you. So, like I said, this is very different than last time. The last one, it was also a resolution was saying you shall, and this is just encouraging people to do it, just like the state of Alaska has done for all of their buildings, just like the city of Sitka has done for all of their buildings, to protect people. So, and it's not perfect, but it's what we have.
Other comments in the assembly? Dr. Wayne.
Well, thank you. I don't want people to worry about what I'm going to say. This is a resolution, and Tor is correct. Where there were shalls, there are shoulds, and it is to encourage people to wear a mask. So on the face of that, I think it is not an unreasonable thing to encourage people to wear masks. Those who wish to wear masks can. One of the fears is that, I don't know how many movie buffs there are out there, but the invasion of the body snatchers. The most recent iteration was Donald Sutherland. And I hope it doesn't turn into that. But I do believe that if people want to wear them, and it is okay with this. I am not going to take this apart piece by piece, but I'll just mention something. For example, masks are not encouraged when only direct contact is between members of the same household or when employees are not near each other, meaning within 6 feet. However, recent medical literature has come out to show, for example, that home is where the COVID is, or is it the hearth? Meaning that there are a very large amount of domestic passages of COVID. And so in many of those same countries, they recommend that you wear your mask at home. And in Hong Kong, most recently, they recommend that children over 2 wear their masks. Yet we have here in child care centers, they don't have to wear it, and any child under the age of 12. An additional paper came out recently that said, and this was, I believe, in, I want to say Singapore, can't remember, but one of those highly regulated countries, that the 10 to 19-year-olds had a very high transmission rate, and that means at home. And so that's why this is a resolution, because you can't cover anything unless we adopt Hong Kong rules. We can look at what's happening in Anchorage, where they had a mandate 30 days ago. I was hoping that it would work, but they still seem to be at a peak. And part of this is an interesting paper in JAMA, which was 2019, which was before COVID. And the problem is, and this is done with healthcare workers, it's called pragmatic effectiveness. And that means that people, the vast majority of people, will cheat with their masks for comfort reasons. And that is something that is just a fact. And so for community spread, it is very difficult to prevent that. But I am certainly happy to vote yes on this, because it is a suggestion, and I don't mind suggestions, except if you're going to snatch my body. I do have one further thing to say, and thank you for your patience, and that is cuyos Dios volt perdere prias dementat. And I know if you say something in a foreign language, it has more import. So I leave you with those words, and thank you very much.
Yeah, for the record, I too am comfortable with this. Deb and I do not wear our mask when we go out and walk on the Seawalk. We don't wear our mask when we go to the restaurant, which we do 2 or 3 times a week. But this is simply a resolution suggesting and recommending you wear masks. And I think there's nothing improper about us encouraging people to wear masks. It also specifies that there's supposed to be no negative interface from people wearing masks on people not wearing masks. It was explicit in this resolution, which also brought me some comfort. Other comments from the Assembly?
I'd like to go, please.
Sure, Valerie.
First of all, I note that we got an email from the administrator that after the agenda closed on Wednesday, you and he or he alone decided that this would be added after the deadline, which is normally Wednesday at noon. My email came at 2:18. In my opinion, this is a waste of paper that it's written on, and I am not voting in favor of it. I'm not rolling over. I'm not running for re-election, so I don't have the posture. But it really makes me angry to think that we have 2 assembly members that can bully until they get their way, or 3 or 4 or whatever. And I'm very disenfranchised to see that now you're rolling over. I spoke with you, Mayor Paxton, last week, and I said, you know, I would much prefer that you just put a statement out with our support instead of doing these resolution things. How much time have we wasted on this? It's just crazy that we keep doing these things because 2 or 3 people think that they have control. I will still be a no vote, and I would still favor a statement by you encouraging the wearing of masks. And if the so-called labeled overlords want to do something meaningful, they should attempt an ordinance versus a resolution, which is totally wasteful and unenforceable and very divisive as usual. Thank you.
For the record,
I'd like to speak, Mr. Mayor.
What?
This is Kevin Mosier.
Yeah, please, Kevin.
I'm not really going to go over my reasons why I voted last time. I'm going to be voting no as well. I'm not going to rehash what I said. People want to know all my specific reasons, they can go back. Because I also am getting really tired with this. I understand the intention, but there's a couple problems. I will reemphasize that and I appreciate Dr. Lamb speaking out. That took a lot of courage. And I did say last week that the media is biased, and I know that there are a lot of medical professionals out there that are speaking out, and they're either being censored by the mainstream media or the media, social media companies, or they're being demonized, what have you, or they're just afraid to speak out. And that is a fact. You ask a lot of people and they're afraid to state their opinion nowadays because they don't want to be attacked. And so that goes into my main point why I'm not going to vote no on this, even though you could say, well, it's just an encouragement. Problem with that is this. I don't think it's going to change anyone's behavior. I think this is kind of window dressing to say we're doing something. The people who are not going to wear them are still not going to wear them with this resolution. And although it does say in there that you're not basically to antagonize people, you know, I've learned from talking to people, they don't really read these things. They listen to whatever the media reports, and the media is probably going to report something to the effect of that they're required now when it's just a suggestion. And so all this is going to do is the same thing as last time when I spoke was, this is just going to create more division because the people who don't want to wear them are going to be angry and feel like they're being forced to. And the people who feel like you should, or you don't care about people, or you're dumb, then they're going to be running around and you're going to effectively create some Facebook shaming squads. And people will be, I guarantee you, it's only a matter of time before we start seeing posts on Facebook and Sitka chatters and people saying, oh my gosh, that person doesn't care, they're a bad person. And I think it's a terrible thing to do. And so it's not really going to change anything. And plus, I'm considering, because this is just a suggestion, I'm not going to be wearing a mask. When I go to stores that require it, I will wear those, no problem. And if there's a certain circumstance where it's absolutely necessary, yes. But in the city buildings, you don't have to wear one if you can maintain 6 feet. That includes the assembly hall. And if this was even a mandate, I believe that I personally would qualify for one of those exemptions. And I'm not going to tell anyone because it's none of their business. So I feel like this is just kind of, like I said, window dressing. It's not going to change anything except for it can create more division. I don't think that was the people's intention who did it, but it will have a net effect of creating division and strife, I believe. And so, you know, you could pick apart the medical aspects, and I know I'm going to probably get negative emails, which I will delete and probably block because I'm tired of getting nasty, rude emails from people. I'm tired of hearing about it. And Tora, and I'll address something that you said. I don't mean any disrespect by this, but you said your emails are about 20 to 1 in favor. The thing is, I've learned my almost 2 years being on the assembly, you know, when they elect us, we're representing people, try to represent everyone, but there is definitely a group of people that are always the first to email everyone about every issue, and they think that they're 100% right on every single issue, and they demand that attention. And then you have a lot of people that you just talk to on the street who feel another way, who are not inclined to email. So just because we're not getting emails doesn't mean there aren't a lot of concerned people who do not want this. And I'm really worried there's going to be a lot of arrogance and looking down on people who don't wear it, and even more nasty scowls. And then also you incite people who are just sore and tired of being told what to do, and they're going to feel like they're being told what to do, and they're going to get mad. So I just think that this is unfortunately a very divisive thing, and I can see that it's going to pass. I will be voting no on this, and I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Kevin. Other comments from the Assembly? Dr. Wayne?
Yes, just for the record, I did want to say that I agree with Dr. Lamb. He has a great deal of experience, and I understand what some people may take as nuance, but I understand the difference between community spread and hospital spread. Another thing I'd like to mention is that one of the things I've requested from the state was to grade the positives, meaning grade 1 positive would be asymptomatic. Grade 2 would be mildly symptomatic. Grade 3 would be additional symptoms. And then when you get to the hospital, deal with the severity of why they were hospitalized. Were they discharged in 2 days? Were they there for 10 days? Were they in the ICU? Were they on a vent? And we don't have any of that granular data. I don't know why we don't, but from a medical point of view, you actually need to know what that data is in order to really make rational decisions. And part of the issue is, for example, I was on the state call for infectious fisheries on Friday, And it's very interesting. You have to understand something. What happens to those 85 guys who come up on a boat to one of the fisheries and they test positive? Well, they do their 10 days, they get a letter from the state, and they are sent back to work. Because none of them went to the hospital, none of them did anything. It's a big issue on how to handle them, but the truth of the matter is these people go back to work. And you know what? After isolation, they are now beginning to recommend not retesting because of the difficulty in distinguishing between active shedded RNA, meaning infective, and dead RNA, which is just being shed as the body recovers. And believe it or not, this can take place for up to 6 weeks. So continued testing is felt to be not appropriate. And by the way, we have a shortage of testing supplies, and therefore we need to actually begin to triage a lot of our testing throughout the state and the country. So it's a very interesting and complex problem. This is a resolution. I will take this, Mayor Paxton, as your note saying to encourage people to wear masks, but there's a lot more to it than hysteria. So I will leave it at that.
Other
Thank you.
comments from the Assembly? For the record, I did not co-sponsor this resolution. Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve Resolution 2020-26 on first and final reading, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
No.
Ms. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-2 on item G.
We are not item K, Matt. Excuse me, Matt. May I have a motion, please?
I move to authorize the municipal administrator to execute a Clean Vessel Act grant with ADF&G for $39,000 to support the Crescent Harbor float replacement project.
Second.
Second.
Comments from the public? Comments from the Assembly? Dr. Ween?
Please note this is a 25% match, so we will be responsible for 25%. This is for a sewage lift, which is being paid for by the state, and it is primarily for recreational boating and sports fishing folks in order to have them remove waste. And it is stated that this is a 5-year lifetime. I would be curious to know how long the other one lasted, but we do have to pay, I think it's like $13,000 for this. And it seems a necessary item, and if we can get the funds, it's certainly a good thing, period. Thank you.
Comments from the Assembly? Call for the vote.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
And Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item K.
We're now at item L. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve resolution 2025-20, or 2020-25 on first and final reading, approving submittal and execution of municipal harbor facility grant application to the state of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities in the amount of $1,760,000 for the project entitled Elias Harbor Electrical Replacement.
Second.
Comments from the public? Back to the Assembly. Dr. Ween?
This is a $4.2 million project. It's a 50% match. If we are eligible for it, we will get $1.76 million for this. One thing that is interesting about it, and I would like to hear Mr. Eliason speak to it, and that is this is from the state, And there are two types of grants that you get from the state, Tier 1 and Tier 2. And I remember prior conversations at the assembly table that if you received a Tier 1 in the past, you can forget about getting a Tier 1 anytime soon. And Tier 2, I would like to know, I'll say, what are our realistic chances of getting a Tier 2?
Good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. Stan Eliason, Harbor Master. We came really close a couple years ago. However, the Tier 1, which was, I believe Cordova may have applied for it, and they take priority over Tier 2, so therefore they got the grant monies. And this will be our 4th time applying. It's kind of a gamble in a sense. Crescent Harbor is a Tier 1 project. We applied for the maximum amount, $5 million. We were awarded that. All the other Tier 2s, they did not receive any funding. So it's just, I'm hoping we get it this time. Otherwise, we're going to have to move forward with doing it ourselves.
Okay. And the cost of this, it's listed as 4.2, the financing for that if we are denied. Is it through the Harbor Fund, or we're going to have to bond? So you're going to fund the 4.2 through the Harbor Fund, or the 1.7?
Through the Harbor Fund, and the other portion will be borrowed. I can have finance speak to that if you like.
Okay. So there is a plan as to how to finance it with Plan A, meaning getting a grant, and Plan B if we don't?
That's correct. I'll know what, if we will receive the grant here, maybe mid-October. So that'll give us enough time to get a game plan going.
Okay. So thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Other comments from the public? From the assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve Resolution 2020-25 on first and final reading, Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item L.
Now, item F, I have a motion, please.
I move to approve the increase of the, I'm sorry. I move to approve the increase in FTEs in the Finance Department by 1 new full-time position in order to establish the compliance officer position and to fund this position by moving a portion not to exceed $135,000 of the existing general fund appropriation that was to pay for the debt service of the proposed USDA loan for the electric fund to the appropriate personnel budget lines in the Finance Department.
Second.
Public comment? John, do you want to give us a quick overview of this?
I'll try to make it quick. It's fairly complicated, and I'm actually happy that Mr. Bevan sent an email to all of us earlier to help explain it. But the intent of this, I think we need to focus on, it's a GASB 87 requirement with this capitalization of leases and lease accounting requirement. That's coming. However, it's slightly delayed due to COVID, so the finish line for that has been pushed out a little bit further, but needless to say, we still need to do it. I'm attempting to use that requirement, that inevitable requirement, as an opportunity to accomplish some other short-term improvements, specifically centralized procurement, centralized contracting, and centralized lease management. Lease management is very challenging in the city. It's very segmented. I think our purchasing and our contracting is also very segmented, which makes it hard to have everybody playing by the same rules, and to ensure compliance, essentially, to make sure we're following the code, and having a good source of information and being able to answer questions to the assembly as well when we talk about competitive processes and the documentation behind it. So since I need an FTE to fulfill this GASB 87 requirement, I would like to include with that requirement, and I think I put the job description in here of what I foresee as a compliance officer. Since it's kind of a fiscal compliance role anyway, I wanted to have them develop procurement policies that are in alignment with our code, contracting policies and lease management policies, and then kind of act as the compliance officer to make sure all the other departments are following those procurement and contracting policies.
Okay, comments on assembly? Dr.
I
Wayne?
have one.
Yeah, Valerie, please.
I am of the mindset that we are going to be hurting next year, and to add another position at this time without knowing what the revenues are because of the fallout from COVID, I would prefer that this be a contracted position where we're not paying all those benefits. I mean, you look at the level of pay for this, and then you add in exponentially the benefits. I would prefer, and I've said it before, that it be a contracted position. Thank you.
Other comments from the assembly? Dr. Wayne?
A couple of comments, and if I can ask them one by one. Mr. Leach says not to exceed $135,000. Does that include benefits?
If it's budgeted for $135,000, that would include benefits. That's how it's put in our budget.
And I assume in the memo, it was mentioned that Ms. Haley will, I'll say, move up to be Chief Financial Officer. So I presume that the comptroller position will be filled?
That is correct. And that is also worked in with our FY21 budget for an overlap for the controller position to be filled.
And is this a permanent job? Because it has potentially Mr. Sweeney filling it? Is it the in-between before, or is it, do you view this as a permanent or time-limited position?
I view it as a permanent job given the new federal requirement.
And one of the things that gives me a bit of agita is that I made this up. This is to paraphrase a very well-known saying, and that is, the road to insolvency is paved with FTEs. And I think one of the things that we've heard throughout the years is the number of people that, for example, are employed. It's not like this is a 1 year, it's a forever stamp. And so the question really has to be the absolute necessity. And because I see in the background and an assistant administrator, and I see in the background a vice chief, at the fire hall. And these are things that are kind of allowed, but are not being paid for. So I really have a problem. And I agree with Valerie that we could do some contracting. I've always been for a multi-service law firm that who would have multitude of expertise, which would include these types of things that we can deal on a contract basis. And so again, I also agree with Valerie that we need to look forward and understand how we're going to pay for these things. It is, again, very interesting to kind of peek at or forecast how the economy is going to go with our current trajectory. And I feel that the city needs to, I'll say, fiscally hunker down and get ready for issues. If they don't occur, we'll have that much more money to spend. But I feel uncomfortable with this FTE because I see in the background there are other aspects to the job. And one more notion that I have, and this includes centralized contracting and procurement. Clearly, there's a problem, and I will quote that currently responsibility for contracting and procurement is spread throughout various departments. Some departments have very little support or experience in procurement, and the existing policy based on Sitka General Code is unclear. and followed inconsistently. In many cases, as strong contracting knowledge is lacking, staff struggle to develop contracts. And the question is just begging, how long did people know there were difficulties with these contracting procurements, the general code? So that's the question I'm asking on that.
Other comments from the assembly?
I'm asking, that was a question.
Oh, I missed
That was not rhetorical.
Oh,
I would like
I'm sorry.
an answer.
Well, I can say that besides myself, I don't think anybody here is formally trained in federal or government procurement. Contracting, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jay or Melissa, I've been to school for contracting, and filling FTEs with people that have been to school for contracting is more expensive. So I guess all alternatives here are I send our personnel to get that training, which would cost the city money, or the contracts, if we were to contract this, will also cost more money because it will be more expensive. And since I may not be paying benefits to a contractor, but the contractor is going to cost more to happen. So the burden of contracting has always just fallen on someone's interpretation of the code and whether or not the contract that comes forward is following the code. And we've argued about it many times at the assembly table on whether or not it's appropriate or falls within the bounds. So to make sure we're doing this the right way, it makes sense in my mind to have somebody formally trained and able to do that and put forward some policies that everyone can follow.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tor.
Next.
Tor.
So a few thoughts here. Cleaning up procurement's a good thing. I mean, we are always dealing with it. And I'm not really interested in saying, why haven't we fixed it sooner? Because a city government it's a living entity. I mean, it changes. We always are trying to do better. Situations change and things. And, this to me is an indication that John's trying to change things for the better. If he saw, we obviously have a lack here, and it's something that is a way for us to organically get a little bit better. And that's all we can ask, is to try and get a little bit better every day. We have to have the compliance officer. I mean, if we don't, and we've been told a number of times now, we won't be able to get grants. And that means a lot of the grants that we're both counting on and hoping for just flat won't be there. And as a city in today's United States that can't get grants, where would be, it would make it a much less pleasant place to live if we couldn't access that money. And our taxes would be significantly higher. And it kind of occurs to me that with a compliance officer and hopefully they would save us from lawsuits, and one lawsuit would pay their salary easily. And then finally, the leases are an absolute mess. I mean, we've been dealing with that for years and years, trying to get it cleaned up, and we just haven't had the manpower to do it. We're not even collecting on a lot of the leases, from what I understand, just because we haven't got anybody who can go through them and say, Joe Smith, you've been leasing this for years and you haven't been paying. So I have a strong suspicion that this person will, if not pay for themselves, go a long ways toward it. It's just right there. I think we should listen to our administrator, who has been working very hard and trying to get things set up in an organized fashion, and I'm planning on voting for this.
Other comments from the assembly?
I'd just like to say that I'm planning on voting for this as well. We've actually been hearing about this from the last several administrators, that this is coming down the line, and Jay has been talking about this for quite some time too. The requirements around the new Bulletin 87 are quite stringent, and we need a absolute professional, dedicated person in there to make sure that we're in compliance.
Did we lose Kevin?
Zoom never looked so good.
No, that was Kevin Knox. He finished speaking. I hadn't really intended on saying anything. I'm going to vote yes, but I guess I will. I understand where Valerie and Richard are coming from, and if we had a different person in there, I might not go for it. But I think John has proven himself to the effect that I believe that if and I have talked to him though about it, and we need it, and we have seen him do efficiencies in other areas, and he's seeing some waste and trying to deal with that. So sometimes you clean up some areas and you shore up others, like in this case. This grant thing is another unfunded mandate, which is really bothersome to me. But that's another issue for another time. So I'll be voting yes on this.
My view is that I thought we were going to do this to do two things. One, to deal with the lease issue, which we needed to do, get an assistant controller so that there's overlap, so that when Jay leaves next year, we've got a smooth transition. So I'm going to support this, but I can say I'm going to have to be convinced when our great finance director leaves that we need to be replaced in this thing. I mean, I think we need it for the transition I just talked about and getting the leases in place. Whether we need it in perpetuity, that'll be a decision I'll have to make a year from now. Yeah, Steve.
John, I actually have several questions on this that I think are more lengthy than the table can handle tonight. But I will be sending an email on some follow-up here, and really want to hit hard on the Gatsby requirements for this. I don't fully understand them, and I don't know that the public fully understands them, but I think that's an important message to get out, that we're not doing this because we want to, but because we have to. And that's my initial understanding of it anyway. So you have my support on first reading. We'll see after our conversations where I end up, but I don't believe you bring this position to us in jest. So we'll be meeting soon. Thank you.
Other comments? Yes, Dr. Ween.
A couple of things. With GASB 87, I think this has to do with lease requirements. And can I get a head shake somewhere? Okay, yes, so we're hearing an affirmative. I asked at one point for a printout of all the leases. And I reviewed them. I reviewed the amounts that on my adding machine, how much they brought in, and what the expiration dates. And you have to remember, a lot of the leases and all these other things are spread out over innumerable number of years. The Assembly has no problem giving 55-year leases. And if you look at it and you spread them out and then you break it down to how many leases actually come due a year for analysis or for doing a cost of living income, those kind of things, it's not as much as you might think. Okay, that being said, if you look at how they're going to pay for it, is that it's going to come out of the debt service that we gained through refi of the electrical bonds. And so to me, this is how, again, the good intention, the road to good intention, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Here we've saved some money, and now we are spending it in a particular way as opposed to utilizing it for our overburdened infrastructure or anything like that. And to me, that is part of I'll say, a worldview of how you spend money and where you get it. So here we save on one thing and bam, we send it on another. And in order for me to vote yes for this, I need to, I'll say, be much more convinced that this is true. I understand what Mr. Leach is saying, and I understand how important procurement is, because I know that Assemblyman Mosier and I had conversations about dealing with procurement and how it was changed at this assembly table in some very unusual ways without a peep. And so, again, I'm from Missouri. I need to see it and be convinced. Thank you.
Call for the vote.
I would do another, a few more comments of support, hopefully. One is our overburdened infrastructure. There's no doubt about that. But I would argue that with an overburdened infrastructure that we need to tackle, that's going to require increased contracting work to get that done, and I need that expertise to assist with that. As far as the savings that we've made, $5.3 million over 10 years with the bond refinancing, and that's before we've done the advanced refinancing. And Melissa, you don't need to come to the table, but right now it looks like $750,000 a year additional savings for about how long? Sorry.
It's over 10 years.
We're talking in the terms of millions, and I'm happy to look at this position again down the road to see if the FTE is required in perpetuity, but I don't think the GASB 87 requirement is going to go away, and it's more than just the leases that we have out there. It could be if we lease a vehicle, it's the way we account that. So every single thing that we lease or put out to lease has to be accounted for under these standards, and if we put ourselves at risk on an audit, as was mentioned earlier, we stand to lose our competitiveness in earning grants.
Just for the record, we're not doing this because we saved some money. We've had this discussion and plan for multiple months. Call for the vote.
Okay, I would just like to clarify, this is not an ordinance. It doesn't require 2 readings, so this is a one-time motion of approval this evening. Ms. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes, sorry.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Dr. Wien?
No.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Knox?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-2 on item M.
We're now at item N. Could I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the CARES Act Small Business and Nonprofit Relief and Recovery Grant application and accompanying FAQ.
Second.
Public comment? None. You want to give us a 1-minute overview there, Mr. Administrator?
I can. So thank you. Like with the other categories, I answered Dr. Wien earlier that we have a budget. We've passed the ordinances, but I still want to come back to the assembly with the program as it's developed. So I'm hoping everybody had the opportunity to read through the application. We tried to clarify things as much as possible. You know, we did a beta test with the nonprofit sector. We did a beta test with some of our small businesses, and we got some feedback on what they liked, what they didn't like, where it was confusing, and tried to clear up as much of that as possible. We also pulled in Robin Sherman for some assistance with the nonprofit sector to kind of clean up some of that language. And I think we have I'm confident we have a very good product here. But I want everybody to understand that just like with the utility and the harbor credits, there's always going to be a gotcha moment where somebody finds a hole in the program or a question that we just can't answer right off the bat. So we did our best with an application, a few pages of frequently asked questions, and this might change slightly, but but those changes would happen after we hear that feedback from the community.
Comments from the assembly?
I've got one.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Valerie?
sorry, Val. Go ahead.
It's just a clarification or typo on the page 1, I think, of the application. And I pointed it out to Sarah by text earlier, but right above in section 2, right above the gross revenue for business 2018 or 2019, there's an extra is in that sentence. It says, what is the grant amount is your business? So I think it should say what grant amount, so remove the is the, or what is the grant amount and remove the other is, but it's just, you know, technicality, thanks.
Yeah, it's done. He
Valerie,
also-
do you
he erased
do
it, Valerie.
proofreading for money?
Go ahead,
If they
Tor.
want to hire you.
Tor, do you have something?
No, I was just saying that if Valerie hires out her proofreading abilities, I may be able to
Okay.
use her services.
Dr. Wayne?
On page 3 of the frequently asked questions, bottom, it says, does a nonprofit have to report how it used the grant money? And the answer is nonprofits will be asked to provide a brief report to the CBS no later than 1 year after receipt of grant funds. I'd like to ask the clerk how that is kept track of within the office, so you know when a year is up and when to request the report.
Are you talking about the general fund nonprofit grants? That's the only,
It says here, right here on page 3 at the bottom, second paragraph to the bottom, where it says nonprofits will be asked to provide a brief report to the CBS no later than 1 year after receipt of grant funds. So my question is, what mechanism exists within the city to have a tickler file to call for those? Since I know we're not too good at collecting money, how about reports?
the only experience I can tell you is that the administrative coordinator in our office, she manages the annual nonprofit grants from the general fund, and she has a system set up on her calendar to manage who submits.
But this is from CARES Act, so it's
Okay, and
different.
I guess we haven't talked about that, John,
What?
so I don't have an answer to that.
Why do we have that? I mean, if they have the need, is that where you're going, Dr. Wayne?
No. What I do is if somebody presents a sentence to me, I take it at its face value. And that this is a frequently asked question, so I assume that it was thought about, and I also assume that there must be some reason why a report from nonprofits is being asked for. And so I made that assumption. Now, whether it should happen or not is an entirely different question. So my question is, as it is written, how does the city monitor compliance? That's all. In 1 year from today, how will they get out, remember to ask for reports? It's
Okay,
a very
Mr.
simple,
Administrator, you need to be
very simple
specific.
question.
And I guess my question on that would be, I would think, I don't like this. I don't really think we would need that, and which would fix your concern. I don't see, these are such small grants, I just don't see the need for hundreds of these reports. And maybe I'm alone in that, but I don't really see the need for this.
Yeah, Mr. Administrator, let's wrap this baby up. Gentlemen over in
No problem with removing this question. And I understand Dr. Ween's question too. If it's how are we going to administer it, then I can give a different answer. But I don't think it's necessary because these are small grants and they're used for economic recovery. We're not talking large grants that are going to be audited, that they're to use for specific
other
programs. So this
substantive
can be
questions
removed.
about this,
I think, well, Mr. Mayor, don't cut it off. I mean, I think it's
Just
a worthy
asking
thing to
substantive
debate
questions
and
about the
discuss whether or
damn
not we want it
thing.
in there. I think one of the reasons why we brought it forward from the working group side is just it provides some insight into impact or, you know, if the program was effective and how we might be able to help, you know, nonprofits in the future or, you know, do the work that, you know, we'd like to see on a more sustainable basis. You know, data is always good, so if we can collect it, why not collect it? It does say the second sentence there, it's voluntary, it's not mandatory.
Other questions about the application?
Rex, I have one that actually I was trying to get in about kind of going back to the largest one, I understand that you guys, we don't want it, the board or whatever didn't want to have a larger than $10,000 grant in there. But I think it should be said, and maybe the board can continue to work on this, is to figure out how we're gonna deal with the requests that are going to come from the larger entities. We're gonna get those requests, and with no framework, we're just gonna get them out of the blue. They're gonna just come in saying probably more from nonprofits, but possibly for profit as well. And I think it would behoove us to say, all right, if we're gonna go for a larger grant for the bigger entities, what would be that framework? And I think there's gonna be some mop-up money later in the fall from these programs that aren't gonna use all their money. And if we have even a rough framework laid out, we can say, okay, we can help the larger nonprofits and the larger businesses somewhat now in a meaningful way.
I think one of the discussions that we had is how do we scale all of this? Because yeah, the larger nonprofits, they have a greater need, but smaller businesses have smaller needs at a smaller scale. You know, there's many more smaller businesses out there, and they may say, well, if the larger groups are getting 25% more, I want 25% more. So we couldn't really, with the amount of money that we were dealing with, it was really difficult to be able to scale it. If in the end, you're right, if in the end we don't have a lot of, we don't use this entire pot of money or some other pots of money, then we will have the ability to, come forward and maybe look at addressing some of these other needs, or a second round or something else like that. But with the pot of money that we're dealing with and the scope of work that we're trying to accomplish here, it was, we had to put limits in.
Yeah, I agree with what Kevin said, second that. We can always do another round or what have you, but for now, I think this is okay.
Other questions on this issue? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve the grant application and FAQs, Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeiz?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
And Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item N.
We're now on a person to be heard on any item on or off the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just say a quick word about where the census is currently standing. It was just reported today that Alaska is trending as one of the lowest states right now in its census responses, and I would like to encourage all Sitkans and anybody else outside of Sitka is listening to go in and take the census. It doesn't take much time, and it's really important for us to be able to capture this data and be able to secure the representation and funding that we need and deserve in all of our communities.
I concur with that, Kevin. I mentioned, send email to the municipal clerk. We need to emphasize that on a regular basis. We probably need to put, we need to mention that every Sunday meeting. I agree. Anyway, anything from persons to be heard on or off the agenda. Then we're now back to reports. The only report I have is I had the honor of going to the graveside ceremony of Mr. Gil Truitt. It was a very small ceremony for reasons dealing with COVID and so on and so forth, but it was very impressive. All of his family was there and grandchildren. And I just want to say again that what an incredible leader he was for our city, our region, and our state. And my life has been better because I knew that great man. Administrator?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple things. First off, I wish the Coast Guardsmen were still here, so I could say how much of an honor it was to be able to at least read that recognition for them. It's the 230th birthday of the Coast Guard coming up August 4th. As you can understand, that's near and dear to my heart. But I also want to say that I'm incredibly proud of the incoming skipper there and the Master Chief. I've served with both of them for over 20 years in my past life, and the Sitka Command, Coast Guard Command, is in good hands with those individuals. As you saw, I put a personnel policy out for all visitors, employees, and contractors going into city buildings to wear a face mask if they cannot maintain social distancing of 6 feet from other people. I think that's been beat up already. That doesn't mean you have to walk around with a mask on at all times, but if you cannot maintain 6 feet apart, then please wear a mask. We're working on a joint letter with the Alaska Municipal League and some of the other Alaskan communities addressing needs with the Alaska Marine Highway System. Admiral Tom Barrett is leading that. He was, I believe, Deputy Secretary of Transportation at one point under Panetta, and former Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard from 2002 to 2004. So very knowledgeable, and we'll get some information along to him. Still digging up some data on what's appropriate levels of service, but we'd like to put a team answer forward as the Alaskan communities that need them. We'll push that out. And finally, a little bit late, but I had an introductory meeting with Senator Stedman yesterday in City Hall. We discussed some things like haul-out options and things we could do with Green Lake. It was a very productive meeting and made some very beneficial contacts. That's all I have.
Mr. Hanson?
Can I ask
Sure.
I presume you'll share all the information you get about the Alaska Marine Highway, but you mentioned a team answer. Who is the team?
Alaska Municipal League.
No, a team answer. I'm thinking of the city. If you're going to give an answer to the question that the Alaska Municipal League is asking, are you going to vet it with us first, or is it just going to be just done without our input after it's comprised?
There will be two answers. Okay. One, we're just going to provide the facts and the data to Alaska Municipal League, and they'll be writing a letter in response. So that's the team answer. The other answer is the community itself, and that's the email I sent to the Assembly asking for some input while I craft that letter on behalf of the Assembly, and then we will send that forward to Alaska Marine Line. So the Alaska Marine Highway System. Yeah. So we will be discussing that more before that letter comes forward.
Okay, that sounds great. I know I had corresponded with you that it was difficult to make a decision without some more concise data. So hopefully that'll be forthcoming. Thank you.
Mr. Hanson?
My assistant, Carl Krenna, has been on leave last week and this week. I expect her back next week. Been shorthanded down in the legal department, down by 50%. From a statewide perspective in the legal system, the Alaska Bar Association has canceled or postponed their convention for 2020. Alaska Municipal League and the Alaska Municipal Attorneys Association is still considering whether or not they're going to meet this year for obvious reasons. And the court system, who has put off jury trials until September, is considering moving those trials even further on. It affects some of the litigation that the city is involved in, and we'll see in the next week or two of whether or not there's going to be further continuances or pushing off of jury trials throughout the state of Alaska. Thank you.
There seems to be out there in the public view that I've noted about some form of major solution to a legal problem.
To a what?
Is that going to be public, or is it public now, since some of the questions I've seen zoom around on our emails indicate that that's a public entity, and I was wondering if you'd comment on it.
If you're talking about the Sitka Police Department litigation involved with Ms. Ferguson, that case is.
Yes.
Paperwork, that's still pending. So
Okay,
I'm not
thank
going
you.
to speak to that tonight.
To the public, which is reported on, and the other is considered private. And so I leave you to those reports, not a heck of a lot to be reported in the public. And believe it or not, for those who are curious yellow, not a heck of a lot to be reported on the private aspect of it either. So there's, what I'm telling you, there's not much to report on. Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
I may have the longest report this evening, but I'll go quick, Mayor, I promise. I wanted to also put in a plug for the 2020 census. Sitka, our response rate is about 54% right now. So I've been continuing to push out reminders on Facebook and PSAs and whatnot. We have a Raincoast Data. They have set up kind of a competition in Southeast, and we are in 3rd place right now. So anybody can go to my2020census.gov. In-person response, if you haven't responded, will begin August 11th. So if you're trying to avoid a knock on the door from a census worker, go online and respond to the census. We are a week and a half into our candidate filing period for the municipal election. We have 5 seats to be filled in the election on October 6th. We have a mayoral seat, which is a 2-year term, 2 assembly member seats, which are 3-year terms, and 2 school board member seats, which are also 3-year terms. If folks are interested, they can call me 747-1811, and I can help get them set up with a packet. The filing period closes on Friday, August 7th at 5 p.m. Just a quick overview of the upcoming municipal election. I know folks are starting to wonder what that's going to look like because of the pandemic. I wanted to remind folks they need to be a registered voter in order to vote in that election. That deadline is September 6th, so if you are not currently registered in Sitka, do so before September 6th if you'd like to vote in the municipal election. Sitka voters may choose to vote using any of these available options. We'll have absentee voting by mail, which has been in place historically, advanced voting in person, which will be here at Harrigan Centennial Hall, September 21st through October 5th, and that's weekdays. Folks can vote by fax. They can vote by personal representative, and then they can also vote at the polls on election day. So again, if folks have any questions, they can give me a call.
Thank you. Okay, we're now need a motion to go into executive session. Could I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
I move to go into executive session with Chief Finance and Administrative Officer Jay Sweeney and Controller Melissa Haley under the statutory categories of discussing subjects that tend to prejudice the reputation and character of any person, and to discuss matters the intimate knowledge of which would adversely affect the finances of the city and borough of Sitka, and invite in, if and when ready, even Les Kinnear of Fortress of the Bear.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly? All in favor, say aye. Or do we have to vote? Have to vote. Call for the vote, please.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier? I don't think he's with us.
He said he left because he has a conflict.
Okay. Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
And Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0. Those who are on Zoom, if you can leave the meeting, and then I will go into meeting room 7 and set up the teleconference line.
Okay, so you'll text us
I'll text
the
you when
number?
the line is set up, yes.
But you'll text us the number.
Yep, and I actually emailed it out earlier today, but I will send it to you again.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Does it still say the 4, or wait? Okay. A motion to reconvene.
Motion to reconvene?
I'd like to have a motion, make a motion to reconvene into regular session.
Second.
Comment? You have to take a vote?
You can, yes,
Acclamation.
please.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. I'd like to make a motion that we,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I didn't have my mic on, Tor, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Wayne.
I'd like to make a motion that we grant forbearance to the Fortress of the Bear in the terms that we discussed during executive session.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly for our comment? Call for the vote?
Bax?
Yes. Tor?
Are you there?
Okay, Tori, can you hear us? We're about,
Kevin, can you hear?
yes.
We can hear
Oh.
you, Tor, yes.
Can you hear them?
Yes?
Can hear Kevin.
Obviously you hear me, I don't hear you.
Turn on your speakers.
We hear you, Tor.
Then raise your hand for the vote.
Vote comes up, I vote yes.
Okay.
You guys
Okay.
can hear me.
Call for the vote.
All right, so the motion is to grant the forbearance agreement to Fortress of the Bear in the terms discussed in executive session. Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm back.
All right,
Figured out what,
okay, I just called your name for the vote to grant the,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
And Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0.
Have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 See you later.
all. Well, Dr. Ween.